Welcome to the Cinema 4D R25 course. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the user interface of Cinema 4D. When you start Cinema 4D, you'll be greeted with a quick start dialog. With this, you can create new projects, open old projects, and also your recent projects are listed here. By default, you start with your standard layout. These are all layouts predefined in Cinema 4D. Now, based on what you are doing in Cinema 4D, there's specific layouts best suited for that job. Let's say, for example, you want to model. It will be better to do it inside the modeling layout. You want to sculpt, it's also better to do it inside the sculpt layer, because when you change the layout, the tools also change to the specific tools you can use inside that layout. With a standard layout, this big space is what we call your viewport. This is your viewport. This is where all the objects in your scenes show up. So let's say if I create a cube, it will show up here in my viewport. Now here, the left side, this is where you have your tools. These are the tools you can use to select your objects, manipulate them, move them, rotate them, and scale them. These are the tools here. You can use it here. When you come to the right side column, you have your objects column. This is where you can create all the objects in your scene. And when you look at it, you see that there is this small triangle at the bottom of every object. This, when you click and hold, it will reveal all the hidden objects in that category. So let's say I want to create a sphere. I hold it on it and I can create a sphere here. This is a sphere that is created. When you come here, this is where we call the hierarchy column. This is where all your objects in your scene are listed. So you see I have a cube here and it's listed here. There's a sphere in my scene and it's also listed here. Down here is what we call the attributes manager. This is where you can manipulate the properties of the object selected in your scene. So you see that when I select this cube, the attributes are listed here. I can change the size in the y-axis, or the x-axis, or the z-axis. So I can manipulate the properties of this object in the attributes manager, the same as every object in my scene. So if I select this sphere, I can actually manipulate the properties inside the attributes manager. Now down here, that's where we have the timeline. This is where you can play through your animations or keyframes in your scene. And by default, the duration is 90 frames. 90 frames. You can increase this frames by double clicking and entering it. So let's say I enter 200. Now I have 200 frames. 200 frames. This is where you can play through your timeline, your animations, your keyframes. Then the top here, this is where we have the object modes. By default, you are inside the object mode, which is the model mode, the same as the object mode. With this, you can manipulate the objects. But when you switch to the points mode, you can manipulate the points of an object. And this object is currently a parametric object, so you cannot manipulate the point. But if you convert this object into an editable object, you can manipulate it. And to do that, you click this icon here to convert a parametric object into an editable object. And then with that, you see that we can manipulate the points. You can select the points and then manipulate them. Same as the edge mode. When you go to the edge mode, you can select the edges and manipulate the edges. The polygon mode, or also known as the face mode, you can also select the faces or the polygon of the object and manipulate them. Now here we have the rendering column. This is where you can render your view inside your viewport or send it to a picture viewer to render your final image. You also have the render settings. This is where you can manipulate and change your render settings, the size you want to render, the aspect ratio, the frames you want to render. If you want to render all your frames or the current frame, this is where you can change everything. Come to the save. This is where you can choose the location where your render can be saved. Now beside it is the material column trigger. When you click on it, the material column opens. Here you can create a material and assign it to an object. So you create the material, you can double click, you change the color. Maybe I want my color to be like this, and then I can drag it onto my scene, onto the object to assign that material to that object. So that is it for the user interface for Cinema 4D. In the next video, we're looking at navigating your viewport.